Have you ever noticed that the hardest part about money isn't always the money? It's the decisions, the second guessing, the hesitation, the waiting to feel certain before you move. Welcome back. This is day 23 of your Money Mindset Reset. Yesterday, we talked about patience, the trusting your timeline even when progress feels invisible. Today, we're talking about trusting yourself, specifically in the financial decisions you have to make along the way. Because here's what I've come to understand. Most people don't struggle with money. They struggle with trusting themselves with money. The second guessing, the overthinking, the looking for validation before they move, or the avoidance of deciding it all. And that's not a money problem, that's a trust problem. And trust, it turns out, isn't something you feel and then act on. It's something you build by acting. One of the first financial decisions that I felt truly empowering to me also felt genuinely uncomfortable. And I think that combination is worth paying attention to. So years ago, I bought an SUV in my own name. And that probably sounds like such a small thing. But it wasn't, not for me at least, not at that point in my life. It was the first time I had made a financial decision that was completely mine. No deferring to someone else, no asking for approval, no justifying it afterward in 20 years. So I did the research, I asked the questions, and I made the decision, and then I followed through. Even though it wasn't received particularly well. And what surprised me was that I felt two things at exactly the same time. Clear and uncomfortable. Not confident in the easy, certain way. Clear. Like I knew this was the right move, even though it felt unfamiliar to be the one making it. That combination, clear and uncomfortable at the same time, is something I've come to recognize as a bit of a signal. Not of doubt, but of growth. Comfort isn't a reliable indicator of a good decision. Some of the best decisions you will ever make feel uncomfortable precisely because they're new. Because you're doing something you've never done before. Or you're claiming something that you haven't claimed before. The discomfort isn't the problem, it's the evidence. I felt that same combination more recently, even in a completely different context. In handing over my investment portfolio to a financial advisor, after years of working to gain real control over my own finances, after everything it took to get there, voluntarily giving up any part of that control was not easy. Everything in me resisted it, but I was honest with myself about something. I didn't have the time to manage it well. I didn't have the expertise, and I had no genuine interest in building that expertise, which meant I was the wrong person for that job, regardless of how capable I am in any other area. I made that decision anyway. Clear and uncomfortable simultaneously again. Trusting someone else's judgment in an area where I had worked hard to reclaim my own. And that's the thing about empowering decisions. They don't always look like asserting control. Sometimes the most empowering thing you can do is recognize where your judgment ends and someone else's expertise begins. and then make a deliberate choice to hand it off rather than white knuckling something you're not equipped to handle alone. Now, I'm not saying don't monitor it, but hand over some responsibility. Knowing what you're not the right person to manage is as important as knowing what you are. Delegating deliberately is not the same as deferring out of fear or habit. One is a choice made from clarity. The other is a pattern made from avoidance. Because I know exactly what deferring from avoidance looks like. I lived it. In my first marriage, most financial decisions were handed to my ex-husband by default. Not because I had no opinions. I had plenty. But disagreeing created conflict. He had made the money. He had read the books. He believed he was capable of managing our investments at least as well as a professional would. And taking my perspective on that as anything other than an endorsement felt like an insult to him. So I stopped pushing. I stopped deciding. And every time I deferred, every time I let a decision that was mine to have a voice in get made without my voice, something small eroded. What I didn't understand at the time was that trust in yourself isn't just a feeling. It's a practice. And every time you step back from a decision you deserved to have input in, you get a little less practiced at trusting yourself. It's like a muscle that just gets weak from disuse. It took years to rebuild it. And the rebuilding started with small decisions, ones that felt almost insignificant before it could extend to bigger ones. The cost of consistently deferring decisions isn't just the decisions themselves. It's the compound effect on your confidence. Every time you override your own judgment in favor of someone else's comfort, you teach yourself that your judgment isn't reliable. And that lesson is very hard to unlearn. So tell me, is there a financial decision you've been putting off or deferring to someone else or just altogether avoiding? Now, again, you don't have to name what it is. Just, is there something that your gut already knows that your head keeps talking you out of? That's just a yes or no answer would be great. I'm genuinely curious how many of us are sitting on a decision that really we've already made it internally. So how do you know the difference between a decision that's worth sitting with and one you're avoiding? Here's what I've noticed for myself. When something is genuinely aligned, I stop needing to obsess over every detail. There's this kind of settledness to it. Not certainty exactly, but clarity. Like the decision just makes sense. Even if I can't articulate every reason why. And when something isn't aligned, it doesn't feel that way. It feels like I keep returning to the same questions. I keep finding reasons to wait, looking for one more piece of information that will finally make me feel ready. And I've learned that loop isn't about information. It's about something else. Fear, mostly, or the awareness that moving forward means leaving something else behind. Fear in decisions shows up for me as a research spiral. I want every detail, every option, every possible outcome mapped before I'm going to commit. And then, even after all of that, I want to hesitate. I freeze at the edge of the decision. And sometimes, to escape that loop, then I make a rushed call to just stop the spinning, which that's its own kind of problem, but it's not really deciding. It's just ending the discomfort. Real decisions, empowered decisions, feel different. Not easy, not without discomfort, but clear enough that you feel confidence and peace in moving on. So there are 3 things worth knowing about your own decision making that are important. First, fear feels urgent. It pushes you to decide now, fix it immediately, avoid getting it wrong. When a decision feels like an emergency that needs to be resolved immediately, it's worth asking whether the urgency is real or whether fear is manufacturing it. Second, alignment feels steady, not comfortable necessarily, but settled. Like the decision holds up when you look at it from a different angle, and it still makes sense. And that steadiness, even in the presence of discomfort, is usually a signal worth trusting. Third, overthinking feels endless. There's always one more thing to consider, one more scenario to run, one more piece of information that would help. If you've been in the same decision loop for an unusually long time, the additional research is probably not the missing piece. You don't need perfect information to make a good decision. You need enough information, clear values, and the willingness to adjust if something doesn't work out the way you expected. Most decisions are reversible. Most mistakes are recoverable. The cost of not deciding is often higher than the cost of deciding imperfectly. So we've got 4 more prompts for your journal exercise for today. First, ask yourself, where am I currently stuck in a financial decision? Name it specifically, not like I need to be better with money. One actual decision that's sitting unresolved. Second, what am I afraid of that will happen if I choose wrong? And get past that surface answer. Is it about judgment? Is it about loss of control? Making a mistake that confirms something you're already afraid of being true about you? Third, what does my gut already know? Honestly, not what your anxiety says, not what someone else would say. What would you already know underneath all of it? And fourth, what is one decision that I can make today, even if it's uncomfortable? Not the biggest one, the one that's been sitting the longest, the one your gut already knows the answer to. Because action builds trust faster than thinking ever will. Not because thinking doesn't matter, because it does. But at some point, the thinking has to stop and the deciding has to start. Trusting yourself with money isn't about getting it right every time. It's about making the best decision you can with the information you have at the time and trusting that you can adjust, pivot, and handle the next logical step when it comes. You keep learning, you keep evolving, and every decision you make, including the ones that don't go perfectly, well, it teaches you something that makes the next one better. You don't become confident and then start. You don't become confident and then start deciding. You become confident by deciding. You have more control than you think. You've got this. I'll see you tomorrow for day 24, where we start moving into the final phase of this reset. We're going to talk about identity specifically what it means to stop trying to get better with money and start becoming someone who is. Because there's a difference and it changes everything about how you show up. I'll see you then.